Your body is always trying to keep you in the known, right? Because the known, no matter how painful it is familiar. Boy, I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. And familiar to the brain, to the nervous system, equals safe. It's a survival thing. So this is why willpower and logic and all of the combined intelligence in this room, which is immense, are not enough to get through these things, all right? They won't work alone. You can't outthink a subconscious belief that says, if I succeed, I'll be alone. Or if I rest, I'll fall behind and lose everything. It's like you can't outrun that. So those beliefs have to be felt, processed, and replaced with something that creates true safety. And you also have to realize that the safety that you build will never be 100%. That's super important because I have so many people that are just waiting to feel ready about things, waiting to feel totally safe. You're not going to get there, okay? But it will feel safer than it did. Okay? Let that sink in because that's so important. Because otherwise you'll be waiting forever, wondering why you're not there yet. And that's how you know that you're moving in the right direction, okay? If you're waiting for complete safety, you will stay stuck in these patterns indefinitely. It's just not something that anybody can guarantee, all right? So let's look at some common patterns now. Remember I told you I had a STAL acronym? We're gonna look at some common patterns with sabotage, all right? And so here, what we're gonna do is recognize the most common ways that this is showing up, especially, again, in the areas of health, wealth, and relationships. So let's break it down. We're going to start with the first letter, which is S, all right? And that's starting but not finishing, okay? This is one of the most painful patterns because usually it also comes with shame, okay? So you get the idea, you get the momentum, you start, right? But somewhere maybe in the middle, maybe in the beginning, maybe closer to the end, it's different for everybody, your nervous system pulls the brakes, okay? I had this client, Marcy, and she was this like really creative, intuitive entrepreneur. She had incredible ideas. Her hard drive was like full of these half-written books. So she would tell me all the time, like, oh, I got all these things sitting there and they're like half written and they're ready almost, but not quite. All of these ebooks and even like also like unfinished course modules that she was trying to put together to launch and like partially designed websites. She wasn't lazy. In fact, I mean, she got a lot done. She was afraid. And she was afraid of being seen. She had a lot of visibility blocks. She was afraid of judgment. And she was afraid that if she put herself out there and failed, that it would confirm every fear she'd ever had. So her subconscious linked finishing with exposure and rejection. When her nervous system remembered in one of our sessions, I think it was a hypnotherapy session that we were doing, how in childhood she was like punished when she got attention or like did something really bold. It was like this big thing. Like we uncovered that and then we used some EFT, some inner child work, some eye movement practices, and we changed the narrative for her around that. Changed the narrative around finishing. And once we did that, like she launched a course that had been sitting on her Google Drive for like over 2 years in 2 weeks. It was crazy. And it just goes to show like little shifts can have big power. Okay, so that's S, starting but not finishing. We'll move on to T. T is about time wasting through overthinking or distractions. So T, time wasting, overthinking, distractions. So have you ever like written an email like 10 times and then like never sent it? Or is it just me? Ever spend like hours planning but never like launching or releasing something? Or convince yourself like, oh, I'm just not ready yet on something that you've been working on for months? That's time wasting sabotage. And so that's your brain stalling to buy time and avoid potential danger. Danger like failure, danger like judgment, or success that feels overwhelming. You're not a procrastinator, okay? You have a habit of hesitating. And that's like one of the first things you need to disconnect. Like, you are not a procrastinator. That is not who you are. That is not the capital T truth of you. Just have this habit of hesitating, all right? And that hesitation sends a stress signal to your brain that causes it to respond with fear. Okay? And that fear becomes the reason that you don't take action. All right? So, what feels like, oh, I need to be more productive, I need to get more stuff done, is often my body doesn't feel safe doing the next step. There's a lot of connections with ADHD in the nervous system. So, when you can actually nourish and regulate your nervous system, then uh, a lot of things change with ADHD. So there's a lot of correlations there. Definitely a good topic to go deeper into on another workshop. In my line of work, I usually see something in correlation with that. But, and especially in my community, it's a lot of ADHD. And with a lot of women in the community, especially a lot of women around my age and perimenopause, hormone changes have a lot to do with the distractibility too. So that is often why, at least for women, a lot of times at this point in our life, this is like when everything kind of gets to this culmination of like, gosh, I thought I was able to keep it together in like my 20s and my 30s, and now it's just freaking impossible, you know? And so it's a lot of different things, from hormones to potential neurodivergence to just everyday self-sabotage. There's a lot of factors. So it really depends person to person on what's going on. All right. So A is avoidance of what actually matters. So this is when everything but the thing that you do everything but the thing that moves the needle, basically. You might check off the easy tasks, maybe like clean your house or reorganize your utensil drawer or something like that, instead of having like a hard conversation. You might research creating 10 different other courses other than the one that you're trying to create and launch, if you're, an entrepreneur or a course creator. Maybe you're scrolling instead of feeling what's actually coming up for you. Numbing. So avoidance can feel like relief in the moment, but long term creates disconnection. Okay. It creates disconnection from your desires. It creates disconnection from your truth. It creates disconnection from other people. And it's often tied to stored trauma. So this could be like avoiding intimacy when it reminds us of being hurt, avoiding investing in ourselves when money once brought pain or instability, avoiding change because we've been taught that it's dangerous. And yet it's also the only constant. So it's really a crazy paradox. The problem there is that, it's like if we can't learn to kind of go with the flow of change, it's like there's really nothing else that we can totally count on other than that things are going to inevitably change. Then we move on to L. Leaning on people pleasing. So this is a sneaky one, especially in relationships. You silence your needs, you overgive, you say yes when you really want to say, or at least you mean no. And over time, this resentment starts to build. Your energy gets drained. Your authenticity fades. Sometimes it gets to the point where you're like, God, I don't even know what I actually like anymore. I don't really remember who I am. And that's tough. So this often starts in childhood when love was conditional, or like when connection depended on our performance or on us being helpful. Sometimes it depended on us being like little adults. So your subconscious learned that being agreeable kept you safe. Okay. But as an adult, this pattern sabotages your truth, the very truth of who you are. So if you're an ADHD adult, this mixes and blends with the masking that you might do as well. So this can really help. This can lead to decline in health. It can lead to like your income, your wealth kind of being capped. Your relationships can feel very one-sided. And, recently I was helping a client move from like chronic people pleasing to empowered boundaries. And she thought it was all about improving like her parenting. She thought that's where like the boundaries were lacking. But as we worked on that, it actually completely transformed her business and her marriage too. which was really cool to witness. And basically, it started with her no longer abandoning herself to stay safe. So it's interesting where all these roads lead when you think it's one thing and it kind of turns out to be something else, or it turns out to have a ripple effect that benefits a much broader, wider picture. So let's move on to the other L, which would be letting perfectionism paralyze you. Perfectionism is a common self-sabotage pattern because it feels virtuous, right? But in reality, it's fear, like well manicured, and like dressed in the fancy outfit. But it's still fear. It's fear of being wrong. It's fear of failing publicly. It's fear of not being good enough. And in most cases, perfectionism masquerades as a cover up for shame and as a way to protect ourselves from vulnerability. Okay? But the cost is that we never get to be like fully alive or fully embodied. Okay? So when you wait for perfection or a perfect moment, a perfect body, perfect financial situation, perfect wording, you wait forever. Forever. It doesn't exist. Last year, I was working with, her name was Marcia. She was working on perfectionism. And what that meant in this situation was like helping her feel safe being visible and imperfect. So within a month, like she stopped the over editing, which was like one of the things that she would do all the time. She got really stuck like editing over and over and over and over. And she started like showing up more consistently in her social media and in like, emails that she was sending and stuff that she was doing in her business. And that's when the momentum kicks in, and for her, it was like a total 180 with her business changing within like 6 months of doing these things with her nervous system and kind of rewiring some stuff subconsciously and really cultivating like embodied safety that it was going to be okay to show up as her perfectly imperfect self. So let's kind of like bring it all back here. These patterns don't just show up in business, like I mentioned. In the health, it's going to look like maybe, skipping sleep, numbing with food or screens, avoiding exercise because we link feeling good with vulnerability. And then in wealth, it can look like avoiding money. It can look like undercharging. It can look like spending emotionally to self-soothe. How many people have ever just, checked something out real quick at Amazon and gotten that little dopamine hit and soothed with it? Yep. So, and then in relationships, there's lots of those. Yeah. Okay. This could be like pushing away intimacy or even like choosing the chaos over the calm and the peace because it's like what it's what's familiar, or just losing yourself to somehow stay accepted. Okay. And this could be like in a parenting relationship or in like a partnership or a marriage. So let's just pause here. And I just want you to ask yourself, where have I been calling it procrastination or calling it inconsistency or calling it lack of motivation, but really I'm protecting myself? Let yourself just be curious about that, not critical. Okay. Because what I want you to really know and understand here is that like you're not broken, you're not lazy, you're not a failure, you're wise, you're this protective being whose nervous system has been trying to keep you safe based on an old story that is no longer relevant. So you have the opportunity and the ability to write a new one. We're going to start doing that right now. And that's pretty awesome, actually, that we always have that ability to write a new chapter, make it different than it was before.